This is a mission-focused life with Tim Olafson, co-founder and executive director of Another Child Foundation. Up next, Tim will speak with this week's special guest, offering special insights on how you can live a mission-focused life.
Welcome, everyone. This is A Mission-Focused Life, and I am your host, Tim Olafson. I'm so glad you all have decided to join us today, and I hope this podcast helps you along your faith journey. Today, we have a very special guest. Our guest is Pastor Steve Horn. He is the executive director of the Louisiana Baptist Convention, and he lives in Alexandria, Louisiana. So welcome, Steve.
Well, thank you for having me, Tim. It's good to be with you today, to see you again, and to share a few minutes here on your podcast.
Yes. So we're really excited about this podcast, but I'm excited about having as you as a guest because you're going to bring a little bit different perspective to missions, more maybe in a leadership role than some of our other guests we've had. So really looking forward to the conversation I'm having with you. But I got to know you back in 2009, I think it was, when John Frank Reeve introduced us. You were the senior pastor at First Baptist Church in Lafayette at the time. And as soon as I met you, I knew that you were a real man of God. I could just sense that about you. And actually, if I recall correctly, I think you ended up being on our original board of directors for Another Child. Is that?
That's correct. Yeah. I didn't know that was original, maybe, but but certainly a stint there on the board.
Yeah. Well, your input really helped us get started. It really helped us get going with that Another Child Foundation ministry. And, that's been going for 11 years now. So we're pretty excited about the progress we're making there. But first of all, let's just tell us a little bit more about yourself, your family, and things like that.
Okay. Well, as you've noted, I am currently the executive director for Louisiana Baptist Convention. That's a network of churches who are Southern Baptists, affiliated with the Southern Baptist Convention is our national network. But in Louisiana, we're about 1,600 churches spread across the state of Louisiana. And so I've been called to this role of executive director, which is a resource provider to those churches and I guess a strategist of sorts of those combined efforts. The way that we're organized, I'm not over those churches, but assist them in doing combined cooperative efforts. But before this role, which started back in May of 2019, I was a pastor, as you noted, as pastor of First Baptist Church Lafayette. Was a pastor of that church for 14 years. But in all total, I've been a pastor before this role for 27 years. So that marks a lot of things in my life. I'm married to Lynette. We've been married for that same number of years. In fact, I was married the week before I started as pastor. It kind of all happened simultaneously.
Wow.
And missed my first Sunday actually to get married and go on a honeymoon. So we've been married. This summer will be 29 years. Wow. And we have 2 children. We spread them out. We have a 23-year-old son who is in the midst of COVID-19, has graduated college virtually and now virtually working on an MBA while he teaches and coaches in a small high school there back in Lafayette. And then we have a 10-year-old, so 23 years old and 10 years old, another boy, another son. And, so we're getting to as I told a group the other night that I was speaking to, getting to make all the same mistakes all over again, right? You're supposed to get better at this, but maybe making those same mistakes all over again. But honestly, life is good. We're actually enjoying this season of life, having a 23-year-old, watching him kind of grow into adulthood, trying to figure out, what's next for his life, what's he going to do, but also enjoying the the 10-year-old stuff and all that comes along with 10 years old, the whole youth league sports program again, and, just kind of see him grow and grow up. And so that part is good. That part is good.
Yeah, very good. Apologize for introducing you as Pastor Steve. I just kind of get in that habit of once I know.
Oh, that's good. I'm more suited to being a pastor than anything else, I think. So that's great with me.
Yeah, and the title executive director, it doesn't roll off the tongue.
That's exactly right. It doesn't roll off the tongue.
Yeah. Hey, so I'm excited to hear your perspective on missions and how people can live really a more mission focused life, individuals as well as churches too, because there's churches that I visit, some aren't quite as mission focused. They're more internally focused maybe than what I consider mission focused. And then as far as individuals too. So let's start with this. What excites you about helping people, individuals live a more mission focused life?
Well, that's a great question because you find because at the heart of your question is finding excitement and joy and purpose and meaning in not only your life but in other people's lives, and that's the model of Jesus, right? And so part of what is at the heart of your question is identifying what is discipleship, what is being a disciple of Jesus. And when we think about, first of all, who is Jesus? Certainly, first and foremost, he is our Savior. And without him, there is no salvation. There is no prospect of eternal life. There is no prospect of forgiveness of sin. But in addition to that being primary and first and foremost, then discipleship is following after him, and the Gospels tell us that Jesus came to seek and to save that which was lost. The Gospels tell us that Jesus came to give himself away, his life, a ransom for many. And so to follow him in discipleship is to follow him into seeking and going after the lost. To follow him in discipleship is indeed to offer up ourselves. And so what excites me about leading people to a mission-focused life, probably the heart of that is excitement in leading people to be a disciple of Jesus. And you brought up the aspect, you think of that about this individually, you think about this as a church. I had a friend of mine who is now deceased with the Lord, but he used to say very routinely that if we're not careful, and he would say it from the perspective of a church, he would say something along the lines of, if we're not careful as a church, we will live 52 disconnected Sundays. And that's true. As a pastor, you don't want to live 52 disconnected Sundays. I mean, can something good come of that? Sure. You gather as the people of God, but you want those 52 Sundays that you have to be connected in some way, to build upon each other, to have strategy and purpose and intentionality to it. Now, if you break that down to the individual's life, you don't want to have 365 disconnected days. You don't want to have disconnected years. You want your life to be going somewhere. You want your life to be connected. And I think God gives us that purpose and that particular specific mission for life. We all have a global mission, and that is to, again, back to those items of discipleship, to seek and to save the lost, to be on a mission of seeing other people come to know Jesus Christ. But then we have a specific purpose in life. And so, yeah, there is excitement in helping people to identify that, because at the heart of it, you're helping them to be a disciple of Jesus.
Yeah. I think one of the key things in leadership is really helping people identify what their passions are, because I know there's a lot of people out there who are searching for something. That was my story for a few years. I was sitting in the church wondering, what is this Christian life about? I was living a disconnected life, like you said, but I was looking for something, and it finally took a pastor, my pastor, who kind of said, Tim, I think you need to get involved in mission. So he strongly recommended I go on a mission trip, and that trip really helped me focus and really identified some of the passions that God had put into me to implement into my life. And so as leaders, I think that's one of the things we got to do is help people identify some of their skills and passions that God has placed in them, because He's done that intentionally to use those skills and passions.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's happened to me in that regard is to see, and it's, back to the idea of excitement. It's been exciting to me to see people at different phases of their life. Like I pointed to my son, helping him try to discover. And sometimes as a parent, the best thing to do is kind of hands off on that, because if it's your idea, it may not be there. They may see it as your idea, and but still, helping him find that to the degree that it can. But just thinking about his age, helping people at that very pivotal point of life, but also helping people, business people that are maybe at the beginning of their career, maybe right in the middle of it, discover, what, there's got to be something more than going to the office every day. There's got to be something more than building a business. Yeah. And then I've been a part of several significant things of people finding that purpose at a point where they thought their purpose was good to go to the beach, to spend their years in retirement. One of the stories that is fundamental in my memory, when I became the pastor of First Baptist Lafayette, sometimes I say that I got there just in time for Hurricane Katrina. It was 2005, as many of the listeners will recall, 2005. Of course, that was a moment for Louisiana, for Katrina to hit New Orleans. And Lafayette, I mean, we were the place. We were not heavily impacted by Katrina, the storm, but we were heavily impacted by the evacuees from New Orleans. And there's the college, the university basketball arena, sort of arena that seats probably about 12,000 people in the stadium part of it. At one point, I believe I remember that there were 10,000 evacuees in that as a kind of a mega shelter. And we had a lady in our church who was 70, teaching, nearing retirement in the nursing program at the university. And she was there volunteering, and she called me and she said, we got to do something, we got to do something. And she identified for me that there were a couple of dozen newborn babies in that mega shelter. I mean, literally, that had been born when the hurricane hit, and they were brought to Lafayette, and they were 2 days old to a week old. And she said, my idea is for us as a church to volunteer to get those babies and their families out. And that's what we did. And that totaled to about 120 people, as I recall, all total, when you brought, their siblings and parents with them. And so we did all that, we did all that for a couple of months. And after that, this same lady who made that initial phone call, she called me back up, wanted to meet with me. And in that experience, the Lord was using that experience to call her, instead of to retire. She spent about 10 years after that in a Middle East country, which I won't name, a Middle East country. So, your mind can go there, in a village, teaching and evangelizing, but teaching, basic hygiene, nursing type skills. And she spent a decade of her life from 70, I'd say by that time she went 71 to 81. And I just, my mind just blown away that I could be just a small part of helping her to connect some of those some of those dots. My point about all that is at every phase of life, God can still use a person if we'll just put our yes on the table, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's one of the things I talk about is to be able to identify that you need to be plugged in. You need to be plugged into the source of power that can reveal those opportunities to you. And your church obviously was there, and God used you guys to bring in those families and those young ones, those newborns, and awesome. But yet He used that experience again to help this lady, and just think of what we thought was bad with Katrina, and it was bad. There was a lot of devastation,
Right,
but He always brings some good out of that. And who
right,
knows what kids in the Middle East country were saved or, done, whatever,
right,
because of
right.
just being open to what the Spirit wants you to do. So,
That's right.
yeah.
That's right.
One of the questions I'd like to ask all the guests is, how do you define missions? And not so much as a mission
Mm,
statement, that
right.
we proclaim the gospel and things like that. But how do you define the action mission?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think automatically when someone hears missions, they're hearing something other than evangelism, and they're hearing missions as uh, something beyond their their usual sphere of life. And so, when we think of missions, we almost always think of international missions. I don't think it has to be that way at all. And so, missions for me would be simply synonymous with purpose, and for the Christian would be synonymous with evangelism and discipleship. So, Matthew 28, 18, 19, and 20, Jesus's last words recorded by Matthew, and what the church has traditionally identified as the Great Commission, to go. So you get that idea. That's the active part, to go. And so, yeah, we are going, but, we could go across the street. We could go to our neighbor's house. Kind of a humorous story that God used to poke a hole in my heart. So my oldest, who's now 23, was probably about 7, because I'm identifying it as my pre-Lafayette days, and he was about 7 when we moved to Lafayette. So we're headed home from church one day. I'm pastor, right? And we're headed home from church, and so I didn't always do this, but kind of feeling extra spiritual on this day, I guess. So I turned to him in the back seat saying, what'd y'all talk about in Sunday school today? And he identified the story of the Good Samaritan and to love our neighbor. And so I said, that's great, great story, great teaching. We need to love everybody, So we go another little bit, and he says, in the way that only a 7-year-old could say, Dad, why don't we love our neighbors? And I said, what? Well, of course we love our neighbor. Well, why would you even ask a question like that? And he says, well, doesn't seem like it. And I said, why would you say something like that? Of course we love our neighbors. And he said, again, as only a 7-year-old could say, well, it doesn't seem like it. We never go see them.
Wow.
And you think about life as a typical American family, pull in, garage door comes up, garage door goes down. Yeah, you wave to the neighbors when you see them out in the yard. Knew them, knew their names, but didn't go see them, I guess, in his 7-year-old language. And again, God used that story to kind of sort of poke me to say, all right, action. You're leading people, and you are giving and praying and going at times to places of the world. Go across the street. Go next door. And so, when I hear the word go, let's go. It doesn't have to be overseas. And obviously our world is increasingly multicultural. I mean, right here in a a southern city of Alexandria, Louisiana. My backdoor neighbors are Muslim. One street over, there's several Buddhist families. So the world has, no matter where, almost regardless of where one lives in America, the world has come to us. So I said a lot to say, just to put it simply, missions is going on purpose, though, going on purpose.
I like that. And I think
And
we all can be guilty because sometimes the honesty of a 7-year-old is exactly what we need.
yep,
Because we decipher different things and we kind of put some of those things out of our mind. And sometimes that honesty of Dad, are we loving our neighbors?
right,
Really can wake us up, because I think we're all guilty to some extreme of not doing that. We live in a culture now, like you said, where we drive into our home, we might wave to them continuously and say hi and maybe stop and have a short conversation, but are we in relationship with our neighbors? And I think we all need to be better neighbors in today's time. So defining moment for yourself. You kind of told us your history a little bit. I know you went to seminary, of course. Was there a defining moment in your early life that kind of helped you realize that this is what God wants you to do?
yeah, well, absolutely. I'm one of those folks blessed, and I know it. I mean, I know it. That grow up in a Christian home. So I don't remember a time that my family was not engaged in the life of the church. When I was, my earliest memories are my father worked, as many people did in Louisiana, it seemed in those days, in a 7 days home and 7 days offshore deal. And so my earliest childhood memories are more along the lines with my mother, not because my dad was absent, but because that was his work schedule, 7 and 7. And so I have these very early memories of doing going with my mom to, like, with a ladies group at church, to the nursing home and just visiting people in the nursing home and some things like that. And so again, I just don't have a moment where we were not engaged in the life of the church. And yet some of that actually was probably going through the motions, to be quite honest about it. It was not intentional on my part, wasn't certainly not intentional on my parents' part. It wasn't something that was fake, but it was just something that was very much routine for us.
Yes, routine is the word.
Yeah, routine. But things, when I was a sophomore in high school, would begin to be kind of defining moment for me, because we were all of my childhood, part of a very small church. But we got a new pastor when I was a freshman, and he was younger and he was aggressive, and he led our church for the first time in the history of the church to call an associate pastor dedicated, to youth. And that person was even younger than the pastor, and very aggressive towards youth. That was his calling, that was his job. And I was certainly one of the more faithful attendees, because of, again, my family's background. And Jeff, that was his name. I mean, he just, I was low-hanging fruit to him. And so he invested in me quite a bit. And I like that. I begin to see, hey, I like this. I could see myself doing this. But I was sophomore in high school. I mean, I was like, that's a decision for a different day. Well, the defining moment though was on this one particular Sunday. The pastor was out, and so the youth pastor Jeff gave the sermon, in not the youth service, but the main service. And it was a very evangelistic sermon, with a call at the end, very basic, evangelistically, to to respond today, that if God is calling you, if you feel that knock on the door of your heart, and the way that he explained it was, there's no guarantee that you're ever going to sense that again. And the scriptural theological aspect of today is the day of salvation. And as clear as anything that's ever happened in my life, when he said those words, I thought the same thing about what I began to assess as God's call on my life. And I begin to think in terms that if that is true for salvation, that likely is true for other aspects of discipleship. And so without any warning, without any really weeks long or months long, I immediately that day said, I think that's true for my life, and that I'm committing myself and my future education to being, I didn't know what it looked like, but to be in vocational ministry. Yeah. And so that's the defining moment. And because I had this aggressive pastor, an aggressive youth pastor, they began to immediately, upon me giving them that decision, it wasn't probably, I bet probably not 6 months later, that I gave my first, at 16 years old, gave my first sermon. Really? On a Wednesday evening, small group kind of deal. But that they helped me, they worked with me. I'm so thankful for that today. Their investment in helping me to craft with no training, with no education, but helping me one-on-one craft that message and deliver it, give me feedback. And then that just led into opportunities to do that all throughout my college years. But it all goes back to that defining moment with a sermon, not particularly rooted in that, but that's the way the Spirit meant for me to hear it on that day. Yeah. And really, there was maybe a brief interlude and maybe college years where I, just for a brief period say, I wonder, but really without interruption, I could say, with the exception of maybe a brief interlude, without interruption, the purpose of my life since that moment on a Sunday morning when I was 16 years old.
Yeah. There's two things I take from what you just said, and one is clarity. Sometimes for me, that was the word I've been looking for. It's like I heard it, I didn't actually hear his voice, but I knew that, but it was such a clear message when he spoke to me about being the voice of voiceless children. There was a clarity in that message that was just beyond, it was just so right. It was just, and I knew it right from the time I heard it. It was perfect. It was a perfectly clear message that I had to follow. And the second thing that I want you to kind of expand on maybe just a little bit is the investing of time. Almost all of my guests I've had on this show, so I've had a recurring theme of they had someone who invested time into them. Can you kind of share a little bit more about why it would be important for our listeners to invest time into, maybe a youth, but maybe just other people, invest time into helping them? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, so again, let's think of the model of Jesus. Let's think about the nature of discipleship. Certainly, Jesus had the masses at heart. Looking upon a whole city and with compassion, preaching to the multitudes, having compassion on those multitudes. And so certainly that's part of it. But what was at the heart of Jesus's ministry? The heart of Jesus's ministry was bringing 12 people around him. And even if you focus it even further from the 12, we see these glimpses in the Gospels that there were even a closer core within those 12 of Peter, James and John, 3, even more closely related to Jesus. And so I just think there's a pattern there of scripture further in the New Testament. There's the unmistakable relationship that Paul had with Timothy. So I've often thought of it, and this is not unique to me. I've heard other people talk about this, but I've tried to engage in this kind of thing for myself. Is that there always ought to be, no matter who you are, there always ought to be a Paul in your life, someone that's still speaking into your life. Because back to the idea of clarity that you raised, I mean, there's so many voices all the time. It's good to have somebody to bounce something off of and make sure. So to always have a Paul in your life and to always have a Timothy in your life, so you're getting invested in, but you're also investing in someone else. And so I just think it's a biblical model from Jesus, Paul. I can't think of the exact verse right now, but in one of Paul's letters, he says, take this and teach to faithful men, right? So, I think it's always a model that the Apostle Paul used repeatedly in his ministry. And I'm thankful, man. I could just rattle. I mean, I've already mentioned Jeff at that point in high school. I think about a man in my first pastorate who, I mean, there's just no reason that he took an interest in my life other than he was retired, living in an area that he had not pastored in, and so he didn't know a lot of people, and he had moved there to be near children, and he just invested in my life. And I mean, at every place along life's road, I can think about people that God put them in my life for that, and I want to do the same. I want to do the same for others because I know how important it's been for me.
Yeah. So I think the key takeaway there is to be a mentor for someone and to be mentored by someone. Have someone that you can grow with both ways, help them grow, and then have someone out there that can help you grow. That's pretty good insight. Real quickly, we're starting to come to the end of our time, but the Louisiana Baptist Convention, a lot in the Louisiana Baptist Convention, the work you do there, how are you helping? I know you work with churches and that. How do you help them? What exactly is the goal of what you're trying to do? Is your job?
Well, I think to give a summary statement to our role is that we want churches to know that it's a conviction that we have, but also practical solution for them, that we really can do more together than we can by ourselves. We think that there is a strength in combined influence. We think that there's a strength in combined strategy, and let's face it, there's a strength in combined resources. And so we try to engage our churches, some of them which are very loosely affiliated with us, and they just kind of want the brand, to be quite honest. But then there are other churches, and we're thankful for these that get it, and they believe the things that I just shared. They can rely on the strength that we have in strategy and intentionality. And so, it's an ongoing effort to help people be good thinkers, to be good strategists. I hope that they have found that helpful as we have weathered, this COVID-19 situation. A lot of people have called on us, what are other churches doing? What are other churches doing? Again, it is not our role to tell them what to do. It is not our role to be in our particular kind of network. It is not our role to make them do something, but just be available to them. And I think we've been successful in helping them navigate, understand best practices, and also kind of understand practically and theologically some of the mandates that have come down from the government, and to work through those together. And of course, for Louisiana, as I'm sure many of your listeners will know, I think in 2020, it was a total of 8 times that we were in the so-called cone of uncertainty for a hurricane, with about 5 of those hitting us, a couple of them in a very devastating way, to where with Hurricane Laura, we had hurricane force winds 3 hours north of the coast, which is unheard of. I mean, I've lived in Louisiana all my life, and to have hurricane force, to still have a Category 1 hurricane 3 hours north of the coast is just unheard of. And so an example of what we do is, our combined cooperative disaster relief efforts. So we've been very, very engaged in that in 2020, and on top of COVID, we've been very engaged in combining our efforts towards helping churches and their communities recover from hurricanes. So that's been rewarding. It's the kind of thing that you don't want to happen. It's the kind of thing that, and I'm sitting here in my office days thinking, boy, I hope 2021 is kind to us, and that we don't have a hurricane, and that we can get everybody vaccinated and be done with this. But at the same time, you realize that you had some opportunities because of those things that you would not have had without as I think about it, without the hurricanes. Yeah. So those are some of the kind of things we're doing. You can go to, your listeners can go to our website, louisianabaptists.org. So it's Louisiana Baptist, don't forget the S, Baptists, plural, .org. And you can see the different resources that we have to help churches in our network. Primarily, we focus on these areas. We focus on helping churches plant other churches, and we've planted almost 300 new Southern Baptist congregations within the state of Louisiana since 2010, and we want to continue to do that. We particularly want to help churches plant non-Anglo churches. And so we've been really focused and real strategic, planting Hispanic churches, planting African-American churches. And that's where most of our success in church planting has occurred. We've got a church in New Orleans that is an Egyptian church, meeting in New Orleans. And so again, that's another way that the world is coming to us. Yeah. We're also focused on collegiate ministries. We have a Baptist presence on all of our colleges and universities across the state of Louisiana. That's another big part of what we are cooperatively engaged in. So it takes the burden off of a church in a particular city doing collegiate ministry, especially on the campus. As listeners will know, it's more difficult to do that kind of thing on a college campus. And so, for us to be able to kind of be recognized on campus as just another student organization is helpful. And so that's where we're probably more easily able to do that than a church is able to do that. And then we also provide our churches with resources for evangelism and church growth, and big part of what we're realizing that we already realized this, but I think after COVID, it's going to even be more needed, and that is to help a church revitalize. It's a little bit of a different world than church planting, but it has a lot of the same strategies. That a church gets so low that it's almost as if they're replanting themselves. And so we have folks that can help churches to evaluate that, and and that's just trying to prevent churches from closing the door. Yeah. In particular communities. So those are some things that we do. Oh, I wanted to mention that we also have a multimedia campaign on television channels, radio stations, social media. That's called Here For You. We consider that to be planting seeds. So they're little 30-second gospel, I wouldn't say presentations, but seed planting. Yeah. And we partner with the Billy Graham organization for follow-up If they call or go to the website, then Billy Graham organization actually is the one who fields those calls. And that's where a more extended gospel presentation happens. And then we get that information back. We can spread back to our churches in that particular location. A lot of people think of it as our marketing campaign. We don't really want it to be a marketing campaign. We want it to be a gospel seeding campaign.
There you go.
And that's the way that we look at that. So those are a couple things that we are using the collective influence of the 1,600 Baptist churches to do as one voice in Louisiana.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to say how much I appreciate your leadership, because there's no doubt, and I'm going to say this, I'm going to have a little disclaimer after that. The church is definitely in transition, and how we adapt to that. However, we're not transitioning from the truth. We're not transitioning from the biblical truth in which we are founded upon the foundation of, but how we do church, whether it's through COVID, and maybe that's kind of ramped up our ability to see this as an opportunity instead of a hurdle. And I love the way you use that word opportunity, because I think the churches that are embracing this opportunity as an opportunity instead of something we got to overcome, I think those churches are going to survive and end up thriving. And I think that's what I think the course you have your convention on. So anyway, I just wanted to say thank you for your leadership in that category. And the churches need to be revitalized and they need to be planted. And I think the work that you guys are doing are amazing. Have you got any of the last statement you would like to give to maybe one individual listener out there that's just wondering, what is the first or next step I can take to have a life that has purpose?
Yeah, well, I would simply say to that one listener that it's an old quote from a poem. Only one life to live. Only one life to live. 'Twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last.
Nice.
Only one life to live. I mean, I tell you, life is short. Life is short. COVID has been a reminder to us of that in so many ways, needed ways. And so, now is the day. Now is the day. One less day to be used by God if you don't start seeking Him today, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that would be the word that I'd want to give.
Very good, very good. Because as a person who came to faith and to a real live faith later on in his life, sometimes I lived in a little bit of regret that I seemed like I may have wasted or felt like I wasted some of those early years. But people can't think that way, because those early years formed you into who you are today. And God's timing is always going to be better than our timing. So for those people who maybe feel like they've wasted some time, don't feel that way, because today is the day. It's don't live in the past, live for today, and just enjoy life. So I want to thank you for your time. And so really, that's all the time we have for today. And in the show notes, we're going to have a short link to a survey that you can help to identify the skills and passion that God has placed into you, and where you can use those. And we're also going to have some stuff from Steve, some links to the websites that he had referenced, and really, when you're done with that survey, you're going to get a personalized mission action plan. Anyway, so until next time, live for Jesus and speak life into others. Thank you.
Yeah.
This has been a Mission-Focused Life with Tim Olafson. Find us online at missionfocusedlife.com, as well as on Facebook at facebook.com/missionfocusedlife. You can subscribe to the video version of this show on YouTube and the audio version on Spotify, as well as anywhere you get your podcasts.